Then you can get into a legal issue where you have to fly people to Spain to argue about law, even though you're completely right. If a company wants to be really annoying to you, they can just basically dispute something, and then you have to stand up a local legal team. So you have to be careful where your jurisdiction of your contracts are as well.
Good to know. One of the things I want to talk about as well is, and you and I spoke about this last night, Ryan, is behavioral differences. And some of the offers that might resonate here and do well. We mentioned before about similar verticals, the offers go as well, but there is an awful lot of underlying subtleties that people need to be aware of when they go in terms of how people spend, the amounts that they spend, and overall how they behave. So can you talk a little bit about that in some of the markets?
Sure, yeah. I mean, even in the UK alone, as you go north, it changes. Behavior changes rapidly. Like if you look at the adoption of print media like Yellow Pages, it's quite successful up north. As you go further towards London, nobody reads it at all. And the same happens as you go east across Europe, and you'll find that people in Poland, for example, don't like to use credit cards online. There's a hell of a lot of fraud, so they prefer to pick up the phone. There's a lot of behavior changes as you go further east, and same as you go further south towards the Mediterranean. There's just really, really different in each country, but you can tend to see behavior trends as you go further away from the western side of Europe, and a lot of it's down to fraud, and people just don't trust the internet. So they won't put a credit card into a web page because there's a lot of guys running scams in a lot of those countries, and a lot of people have been burned, so they just don't trust it as much. So telephony becomes more important, but the actual value of the lead goes down, obviously, because of the size of the economies.
Right. Well, I think, given some of the emails I get with some of the offers I get from over in the UK, they've probably exhausted all the suckers there, so they're hitting the States, right?
Yeah, you get a lot of emails from Nigeria as well.
Right, right, exactly. So, Arno, anything to add to the behavioral question?
I think it's not very different from the US. French people are less into credits and things like that, and for example, education is not a market in France. There is no advertising for schools. There is small differences like this, but mostly it's the same verticals. It's home repairs, credits, insurance, financial products for your savings, things like that. It's quite the same. I think Europe, you can. There is 3 sub-regions in Europe. The Nordic countries are very interesting, very advanced. So I would put Scandinavian countries and UK in that. Then you have Germany and France a little bit behind, and then you have the southern and eastern countries that are very late behind, but going very fast. They have a huge growth and catching up, but quite late. So Europe is divided in 3 main regions, I think.
Okay. Anything more to add on that, Ryan? Or?
No, I agree. I think it's a massive opportunity, but it's not necessarily an easy one to crack. We've stepped into a lot of countries and spent a lot of money and just given up because we didn't have the right people there. And it doesn't mean the opportunity is not there, but it just means it's difficult to go after the opportunity. And also, healthcare is an interesting market in Europe because you get free healthcare pretty much everywhere. So it is growing. So people are taking private healthcare. Like everybody who works for us has private healthcare because it is better, basically. But it's not the size of the market that it is here. Comparatively to population, it's tiny in size. But a lot of things like that they're growing. They're getting bigger and bigger, and they're way more affordable than they are here as well. But people are starting to do different things, and there's a lot more technology. Like when I first moved, I lived in Palo Alto and I moved back to the UK in 2007, 2008. There just wasn't much in the way of technology companies. That's changed dramatically, so there's a lot of competition in Europe now that didn't used to exist. I think the first event I went to in London had about 50 different people there. I think that was pretty much the whole technology scene of London at the time. It wasn't big. It's changed dramatically over the past couple of years.
Yeah. Arno, you had something to add?
Same thing in France, and 75% of the French population have a smartphone, so it can grow very fast because all the basics are here. The market is here, just waiting to become reality.
Great. So, from a technology perspective, I would imagine there really is no difference in terms of call handling, lead handling, metrics, optimization, right? It's all the same platform from your perspective. It's really just the overlay of behavioral issues.
Yeah, and it's what you can actually enhance a call with based on data protection. So you can do a lot here that you can't do in Europe. So you can do reverse lookups here. That just doesn't happen in Europe, and some countries are far worse than others. So the technology remains the same, but the application can be different based on, you have to be very careful what you do with people's data in the EU in general.
Great. And that's actually a good transition into a much broader and risk-fraught area, which is regulation and the broad variability in the way things are treated here in the States, which you just alluded to. TCPA, HIPAA, safe harbors, et cetera. So you want to delve into that a little bit?
Sure. Does anybody know what safe harbor is? Does anybody operate in Europe? No? Okay, great. So if you operate in Europe, you used to have to sign up to Safe Harbor, which means that you will abide by the EU Data Protection Act. You're not actually allowed to take somebody's data and bring it to the US unless you signed up to Safe Harbor. A lot of people ignored that because it's a self-certification thing, and the EU government basically just threw it out. So the EU regulatory bodies just threw this law out. So now pretty much every single company from the US that operates in the EU, including Facebook, Google, everybody else, is in limbo at the moment. Nobody really knows what's going to happen. There's a decision coming on the 31st of January, apparently. And the short-term solution is for people to tighten up their terms and conditions, but the terms and conditions are overridden by local laws, which are like the Human Rights Act and stuff like that. So it's in a very weird situation. But it becomes worse when you deal in telephony because you can't really put terms and conditions on a phone number. So if I call a UK number from a UK mobile, I am well within my rights to expect that my information will be protected by the UK and that my data will be stored in the UK. But that is not always the case anymore because a lot of companies here are operating in the UK. Now when I phone a UK number, I don't know that my data is actually being taken away. Now if I go to a .com website, I can be expected to understand that my data will be stored in the US. It's logical. If I go to .co.uk, you actually need to put a lot of information to state that your information will not be treated under these terms. So in telephony, there's a lot of noise at the moment around, well, hang on a second, these guys don't know what's happening, and their records and information can actually be stored overseas. And the issue is that, for example, if I'm in Europe, I can phone up or email Facebook and say, delete all of my information, I don't want you to store any of my information anymore. That information, with the exception of the law side of it, in terms of, if you've done something wrong, that information belongs to me, it doesn't belong to the company, so I can ask for all of my info to be deleted. That is not the case in the US. So the reason that the Safe Harbor agreement was actually cancelled is because somebody actually complained to Facebook, who said, too bad, we own your data, you don't own the data, and it escalated from there into the EU courts. So basically that law's been thrown out, and now everybody's got to work out what to do. But it's going to be very interesting to see how they get around the problem, because you've got two jurisdictions which are completely different, and I don't know how you can have both. So the only real way is to segregate data, so store all the EU data in the EU under EU laws, under an EU subsidiary, and vice versa over here.
On the other side, European regulation organizations are much less powerful and hard, and that there seems to be here. You never heard of the European regulation organization in Europe. That's maybe why nobody cared about Safe Harbor anyway, because it's very rare that you have any problems about that. So people follow the rules more or less if they want, and if they don't, they really have to push hard to see somebody from the regulations come to their office. But this is the good side of the situation too. It's not only bad regulations, it's also kind of an anarchy situation where you can almost do what you want.
Right. There's a lot of laws, but
if you are a small or a medium player. If you are big players, then they will look at you, but if you are a small...
It is changing. I mean, there's a lot of lawsuits against Microsoft and against Google, which are starting up. Basically, they're trying to do something about it at the moment, but who knows if they'll succeed. It's very difficult to do anything other than fine companies. So they're basically fining people, and that's about the extent of it. But there are certain laws, like if you record a call in the UK and you don't play a message to notify the caller that the call is being recorded, it's a criminal offense, so it's not a civil offense. It's a criminal offense for the operator and for the person who set up the call recording. So That has been charged. A lot of people have been charged with things like that. So that's becoming increasingly noisy. And there's a lot of laws like that, but most of them, as you say, don't get enforced until something really bad happens, and then they try and enforce it across the board, going back like 10 years. But up until then, no one cares.
So in your experience today, I'd be interested to hear, in terms of your clients, what's the kind of mix of folks coming from stateside into international markets versus international companies doing international lead gen?
Most of our customers are European, so we kicked off in London, our headquarters is in Notting Hill, so most of our original customers were there, so I think probably about now 50% are UK, 30% France, and the rest scattered, and now the US is growing quite large for us, but the vast majority of our customers are in Europe. And we do get a lot of companies who say, you know, what do you do with my data? You can't take my data to the US, so we have to segregate data. And we don't have to abide by safe harbor because we're actually a UK company, but we do get a lot of questions around that. We don't get questions going the other way because the US laws are less